Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into something really profound, incredibly timely. How ancient wisdom can guide us through, well, life's biggest challenges, sickness and death.
Definitely universal topics.
Absolutely. And our main source today is a remarkable book, Mindfully Facing Disease and Death by Analayo. It's amazing because it draws directly from ancient Buddhist texts.
And many translated by the author for the first time, which is quite something.
It really is. And, it's got praise from people like John Kabat-Zinn.
Pioneer of mindfulness in medicine.
Right. And Vidyamala Birch, too, known for mindfulness with pain. Their support highlights how practical this is.
It shows how these, ancient ideas are really being integrated now. Modern medicine, psychology, healthcare.
It's not just philosophy locked away somewhere. It feels very relevant.
So our mission today really is to pull out the key insights. How to approach ill health, end of life, wisely, compassionately.
Think of it as a practice manual, maybe?
Exactly. A practice manual, not just if you're facing it yourself, but also if you want to help others to support them.
Okay, let's unpack this then. A practice manual for life's toughest moments, drawn from these deep historical sources. And it starts with a really interesting framework.
It does.
This idea of the Buddha as the physician of the world, that's more than just a nice phrase, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's foundational. You see, the core teaching, the Four Noble Truths, it's actually laid out like a medical diagnosis.
How so?
Well, first, the diagnosis, dukkha, usually translated as suffering, but it's broader, like a fundamental unsatisfactoriness in life.
Okay.
Then the cause, the etiology, craving or attachment. Then the prognosis that this dukkha can actually cease.
There's a way out.
Right. And finally, the treatment plan.
Yeah.
The Eightfold Path. This whole structure is the blueprint for how early Buddhism tackles disease and death.
So it's like a regular doctor cures the body, maybe. But the Buddha offers a cure for, well, a much wider range of suffering. Birth, old age, disease, death, sadness, dukkha itself.
Precisely. It's a much deeper kind of cure. And what's fascinating here is the early Buddhist idea of mental health. It goes way beyond just not being ill.
Beyond what maybe modern psychology aims for.
Way beyond. It's aiming for total mental health, full awakening, eradicating all the mental defilements, the impurities.
Wow. And a key part of that treatment plan, that Eightfold Path, is right mindfulness. That seems crucial for navigating illness.
Absolutely essential. It's the tool you use.
So how does this work in practice? A really powerful teaching seems to be about not letting the mind get sick just because the body is.
Yes, guarding the mind.
The book gives this great example, a lay disciple called Nakula. He was getting old, feeling frail.
A very relatable situation.
And the Buddha tells him, essentially, okay, your body might be sick, but don't let your mind be sick. And then Sariputta, the chief disciple, explains how.
Right. Sariputta breaks it down using the 5 aggregates of clinging.
Okay, what are those?
Basically the components of our experience. Bodily form, feelings, perception, mental formations, consciousness. The things we tend to grab onto and say, that's me, that's mine. And Sariputta points out, look, if you cling to these things as a fixed I, you will suffer when they change, because they always change, especially the body when it gets sick.
That leads directly to this amazing image, the simile of the 2 arrows. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's incredibly useful. The first arrow is the physical pain itself, the actual sensation. Sometimes you just can't avoid it.
Right, stub your toe, get sick. It hurts.
Exactly. But the second arrow, that's the mental suffering we add. The grief, the resistance, the why me, the worry, the despair.
The reaction to the pain.
That's it. And the teaching says you might not be able to avoid the first arrow, but you can learn to avoid shooting yourself with the second one.
So what does this mean for you, the listener, facing pain?
It means, well, by cultivating this present moment awareness of the physical sensation without immediately identifying with it, saying, this is my pain, without reacting with fear or anger.
You can actually lessen the mental part.
Dramatically. You can avoid a huge amount of the mental suffering. The mind doesn't have to suffer just because the body does. You can train it.
That's powerful.
And it connects to these underlying tendencies, things like sensual passion, aversion, ignorance. They get triggered by feelings pleasant, painful, neutral.
So a key task is not letting those get activated.
Exactly. Like, if you feel pain, the tendency is aversion, pushing it away, hating it. If you can just observe the feeling without feeding that aversion, you stop the cycle.
It reminds me of what the book says about using sensual pleasure as a distraction, like watching TV to forget the pain.
Right. It gives temporary relief, maybe.
But the text calls it long-term deterioration. a vicious circle.
Because you're not really dealing with the root cause, you're just layering something else on top, often something that causes its own problems later.
And importantly, this isn't saying don't go to the doctor.
Oh, absolutely not. It's not a replacement for medical care. It supplements it. It helps you manage the experience of illness, specifically avoiding that second arrow.
Okay, so you guard the mind, you watch out for the second arrow. What else builds this inner strength?
Well, the awakening factors are key. These are 7 positive mental qualities.
Like antidotes to negative states.
Exactly. They actively promote mental health. You've got mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. They directly counter the 5 hindrances.
Things like desire, ill will, sleepiness, restlessness, doubt.
Precisely those. And what's really fascinating, the text suggests these awakening factors have a powerful healing effect.
How so?
There are stories. The Buddha himself, his disciples Mahakassapa, Mahamoggallana, apparently they recovered from illness or even re-experienced awakening just by hearing or recollecting these factors.
It's just hearing about them.
It seems so. Which suggests, their power isn't only for meditation masters. Even just remembering them, reciting them can be inspiring, uplifting. Maybe even healing in some way.
That's quite something. There's another example, Anuruddha.
Yes, Anuruddha. He was in severe pain, getting worse. But instead of, say, trying to just check out into some deep meditative state of cessation,
Which he could apparently do.
right, he chose instead to practice the 4 establishments of mindfulness, contemplating body, feelings, mind, mental objects. Right there with the pain.
So mindfulness wasn't just a way out of pain, but a way to be with it. A preferable option, the book says.
Exactly. It shows you engage with the reality of the pain mindfully rather than just trying to escape it completely.
And this wasn't just for monks. There was a lay disciple, Manadhya,
Manadhya, right. He also recovered from illness using these mindfulness practices.
and apparently attained non-return, a very high level of liberation, overcoming things like clinging to self, doubt, desire, aversion.
It really shows the transformative potential, doesn't it? Layperson, monastic, deep practice works. It leads to freedom.
It seems like all these practices, guarding the mind, cultivating these positive factors, they all tie together.
They do. They connect back to the threefold training, which is sort of the foundation for this supreme mental health. Virtue, concentration, and wisdom. They support each other.
Okay, let's shift to fear. Facing illness, especially severe illness, can be terrifying. How does this wisdom help with fear?
There's a great story about Anathapindika, a major lay supporter of the Buddha.
Right. Very sick but fearless. Why?
The texts say it was his unshakable confidence in the Buddha, the teaching, the community, plus his own ethical conduct, his virtue.
So confidence born from understanding and good deeds.
Yes, and specifically, he had achieved stream entry, the first stage of awakening. This removes fundamental doubt. It gives you this inner certainty, this self-reliance.
So for someone helping a sick person,
Encouraging them to remember their own good qualities, their wholesome actions, that can really help diminish fear, tapping into their own inner resources.
that makes sense. But sometimes, even deep practice can have pitfalls. There's a story about a monastic, Asaji.
Yes, Asaji. He was sick, but his problem was an attachment to his deep meditation states, his concentration experiences.
Wait, attachment to meditation. How can that be bad?
Well, it shows that anything, even something seemingly positive, like a peaceful state, can become an object of clinging. And clinging is the root of suffering. It obstructs full liberation.
So it's not enough just to get into a peaceful state. You have to not cling even to that.
Exactly. This points towards the real medicine, which is insight. Insight into the nature of things.
Which means?
Relinquishing all identification, all attachment. Seeing things as they are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and importantly, not self. Anatta, letting go completely.
This idea of not self
Yeah.
seems central.
Absolutely fundamental. It's the understanding that there's no fixed, permanent, independent I or me controlling things or owning these experiences. It's a radical letting go.
There's another story, Khemaka, also a monastic, very ill.
Yes, Kamaka's dialogue is incredibly profound.
He explained the difference between realizing not self at stream entry, which gets rid of the basic personality view, and the full freedom from all subtle conceit, all sense of I am, that comes only with full awakening, with arahantship, even when he was incredibly sick.
He used these brilliant similes. It really highlights, well, it raises a question for you, listening. What can we learn from people who are sick? They might have profound insights.
So it's an invitation to listen.
Yes. Be receptive. Don't just see them as patients needing care. They might have wisdom to share. And it's also encouragement for sick people themselves. Speak your truth.
That mutual openness can be transformative.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving towards something very practical now. The book discusses a kind of curative meditation program from the Jiramananda Sutta.
Ah, yes, the 10 perceptions.
Right. The Buddha prescribed these for a sick monk, Jiramananda, and he recovered.
And interestingly, it was Ananda who delivered the teaching, not the Buddha himself.
Which implies
That the healing power isn't tied to the Buddha's physical presence. The teaching itself, the practice, holds the power. It's accessible.
Let's look at some of these perceptions. What are they about?
Okay, well, one is the perception of impermanence. You apply this to those 5 aggregates we mentioned: body, feeling, perception, formations, consciousness.
How does that help when you're sick?
By consciously seeing how everything is changing moment to moment, even the body, even the illness, you train the mind not to cling to a fixed idea of health or sickness or even me. It counters that rigidity.
Makes you more adaptable.
Exactly. Then there's the perception of not self applied to the 6 senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, and their objects, seeing them as empty, not mine.
Reinforcing that letting go of identification.
Precisely. Another one is the perception of lack of beauty in the body.
That sounds a bit grim.
It's not about negativity. It's about cultivating a realistic view. Seeing the body as it is composed of parts, prone to decay, undermines obsessive attachment to appearance or sensual desire rooted in the body. It fosters renunciation, turning towards inner qualities.
Okay, I see. What else?
The perception of danger in the body, recognizing its vulnerability. Sickness, pain, heat, cold, hunger, thirst. All the ways the body can be afflicted.
How is seeing danger helpful?
It broadens your perspective. It fosters acceptance of the body's nature, reduces unrealistic expectations, and cultivates equanimity when things inevitably go wrong. It's about clear seeing, not morbidity.
Makes sense. There's also one about abandoning thoughts.
Yes, the perception of abandoning, making a conscious effort to let go of unwholesome thoughts like desire, ill will, harmfulness as they arise, and instead cultivating wholesome states. Active mental gardening, you could say.
I like that. And perceptions of dispassion and cessation.
Right. Inclining the mind towards nirvana, seeing it as peaceful, sublime, the end of suffering. It gives you a positive goal, a refuge beyond the cycle of dissatisfaction.
And not delighting in the world. Letting go of opinions.
Yeah, the perception of not delighting in the whole world. It's a deeper letting go of views, preferences, judgments, subtle attachments.
And seeing impermanence in all formations.
That's a big one. Perception of impermanence in all formations, recognizing everything conditioned is impermanent. This leads towards the unconditioned, towards nirvana.
And finally, the program culminates in
Mindfulness of breathing, the anapanasati, usually taught in 16 steps. It brings everything together, anchoring awareness in the simple, ever-present breath.
How does that round it off?
It provides a concrete practice that embodies all these principles. As you watch the breath, you see impermanence, you see not self, you develop concentration, tranquility. It integrates body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. It's a complete path in itself.
Wow, that really does sound like a systematic program, integrating so much of the Buddhist approach.
It's incredibly comprehensive.
Okay, let's move now to facing death itself, the ultimate challenge.
Yes. And the texts are very direct about the inevitability of death. It's presented as a core aspect of dukkha, right alongside birth, aging, and disease.
There's that quote from King Pasenadi, realizing everyone dies.
Will entirely pass away, none of them will not expire. Even the Buddha himself, despite his powers, physically passed away.
So the deathless isn't about avoiding physical death.
No. The deathless is nirvana. It's the state attained through awakening, where you're no longer affected by mortality because you've overcome clinging and ignorance. You're free from the cycle of rebirth.
And a key practice here is recollection of death.
Marnasati, yes, vital.
The texts warn against being negligent, like thinking, oh, I'll live for a few more days.
Right. True diligence is contemplating death almost constantly. In the interval between an out-breath and an in-breath, one text says.
That's intense.
It is. It's meant to cut through complacency, to realize that everything conditioned is empty, like a magical illusion, without any true essence.
Every breath, closer to death. It really focuses the mind on what matters.
It does. And we have these inspiring examples of people facing death mindfully. Siddha, the lay disciple.
Yes, tell us about him.
On his deathbed, he was apparently visited by deities offering him the chance to become a universal monarch, worldly power.
Wow. What did he do?
He just dismissed it, said it was impermanent, dukkha, empty, and not self. His focus was elsewhere.
Where?
He spent his time gently teaching his relatives about generosity and compassion, tailoring his deep wisdom to what they could understand.
That's incredible composure.
And he died liberated, reborn in the pure abodes, realms only for non-returners. It shows how deep his practice went. He wasn't swayed by illusion, even at the end.
Amazing. There's also the story of the young monastic.
Ah, yes. He was dying and initially felt some regret.
What did the Buddha do?
The Buddha didn't offer false comfort. He guided the young monk's mind towards insight. Insight into how feelings arise based on sense contact, seeing arises from the eye and forms, hearing from the ear and sounds and so on, all conditioned.
Pointing away from the conditioned.
Towards the unconditioned, towards nirvana. And the monk passed away peacefully, even joyfully, with a clear mind. Insight transformed his final moments.
These stories are powerful. And then, of course, the ultimate example. The Buddha's own passing.
The Mahaparinibbana. It truly is a masterclass.
And Nada was grieving terribly.
Understandably. And the Buddha's response, his last words, were so direct, so potent.
Formations are impermanent. Strive on with diligence.
That's it. A final reminder of the core truth and the path. No sentimentality, just clear instruction.
And his final actions were meditative.
Extraordinarily so. He went up and down through the levels of meditative absorption, the 4 jhanas, the 4 immaterial states, ascending, descending.
And then
He finally passed away while established in the 4th jhana, a state of perfect equanimity, pure mindfulness, deep concentration.
what does that signify?
It underlines really that mindfulness is the crucial quality. From the very first steps on the path, right through intense pain or grief, caring for others, and even in the moment of dying itself, mindfulness, cultivated and refined, is key, right to the very end.
We've covered so much in this deep dive into mindfully facing disease and death. It's clear these ancient teachings offer incredibly profound, practical tools
Timeless tools, really.
for transforming how we experience sickness, pain, and death. It goes so far beyond just, the mindfulness for stress reduction we often hear about.
Much, much deeper. It's about liberation, ultimately. Real peace.
And it's touching to remember why Amantu asked Analayo to compile this in the first place.
His own cancer diagnosis. He found these scattered teachings formed a coherent, powerful guide, a practice that stayed with him.
He found it accompanied him on his final journey.
Yes.
And that brings us to a final thought, something for you to really consider. After his diagnosis, Amantu lived by 2 principles. First, today is the last day of my life.
Which fostered gratitude, appreciation for every moment.
And second, today is the first day of my life.
A sense of freshness, possibility, openness.
So the question for you is, what might living with that kind of dual awareness, the preciousness of the present, the reality of impermanence, and the freshness of possibility, what might that mean for you? How could it change your daily life?